Greetings and aloha. I'm Bodhi B, coming to you from the slopes of Haleakala Crater here on Maui, Hawaii. And this is Death Tracks. Join us as we follow tracks, make tracks, and listen to musical tracks as we wander and wonder in the fields of conscious living and dying, and we contemplate the endings of what is dying in the world. We will die, and we don't know when. Everyone we love and care about will die, and we don't know when. How and whether we use this information will shape the course of our lives, our relationships, and our attunement to the sacred. It will shape who we are as a community and how we care for each other now and when we are dying. Thank you for joining us.
See what you lost when you left this world, this sweet old world. What you lost when you left this world, this sweet old world. The breath from your own lips, the touch of fingertips, a sweet and tender kiss, the sound of a midnight train wearing someone's ring, someone calling your name, somebody so what you lost when you left this world, this sweet old world. In love, promises make good. Your own flesh and blood, looking for some truth, dancing with no shoes. The beat, the rhythm, what you lost when you left this world, this sweet old world. See what you lost when you left this world.
That was Lucinda Williams. I'm Bodhi B. This is Death Tracks on KEKU 88.5 FM on Maui, streaming live worldwide on KAKUFM.org. Beautiful song, Sweet Old World, and Seems to me when most people find out they're dying, the thing they want most is more time. And what do we want more time for? Well, in most cases, it's to be around the people we love and care about, watch our children grow, grandchildren grow, be with our friends, be with life itself, keep doing the things we love to do. Of course, that would seem, no duh, that'd be pretty obvious. And no matter how much people may be suffering, miserable, and in pain, almost everyone wants more time to not be dying, more time to not be in their deathbed about to die. And of course, I don't think I've ever heard anybody say they wish they had more time to go to work and be at the office or be in their job, whatever that is. Haven't heard that. People want to be with the people they love and care about. And maybe really, really fully get that that's really the most important thing. At least that's true for most everybody. When I ask groups of people, when do you start to die? Almost everybody says, when you're born. And that's a gross misunderstanding, in my view. In fact, it does a tremendous disservice to people who are actually dying. I mean, if you find out your friend's dying, be like, well, what's the big deal? We're all dying. No, we're not all dying, and the person who is dying is doing something that we're not doing. What is it that we're not doing? That their dying people are doing? What a great question.
Dear 6-year-old, training wheels are for babies. Just let go already. Regards, a 7-year-old.
Dear 7-year-old, no matter what anyone says, stay weird. Signed, an 8-year-old.
Dear 8-year-old, find out your babysitter's weakness, then use it against them. Signed, a 9-year-old.
Dear 9-year-olds, don't get involved with the popular kids. They're narcissistic capitalists that know nothing about politics. Signed, a 12-year-old.
Dear 12-year-old, ask her to dance. Just trust me on this one. Signed, a 16-year-old.
Dear 16-year-old, don't let your mom throw away your Legos. Signed, an 18-year-old.
Dear 18-year-old, go easy on the makeup. You're not as ugly as you think. Love, a 19-year-old.
Dear 19-year-old, just because it's an all-you-can-eat buffet does not mean you need to eat all you can.
Your parents have better interest rates than your credit card. If he says he has a weekend home in the suburbs, he's married.
That rust protection undercoating, it's actually a great deal.
Whatever you do, never order the salad from a truck stop.
Back up your hard drive. Now.
I mean, who even does that?
Getting laid off can be a blessing in disguise.
Being a starving artist only works if you actually make art.
Always be kind to your family. You'll need each other when things get tough.
Stop panicking. Being a single mom is an incredible thing. I was 22. I had this little kid. I named him Vladimir. He's 14 now. He makes me proud. So,
dear 36-year-old, stop caring so much about what other people think. They're not thinking about you at all. Signed, a 47-year-old.
Dear 47-year-old, a midlife crisis does not look good on you. Signed, a 48-year-old.
Dear 48-year-old, always tell the truth, except when it comes to your online dating profile.
Dear 51-year-old, one cat is enough cats. Signed, a 53-year-old.
Dear 53-year-old, it's never too late to try something new.
I've decided to take my husband's Corvette and go to racing school. If Paul Newman could do it, why can't I?
Dear 72-year-old, spend all your money. Otherwise, your kids are going to do it for you. Sincerely, an 85-year-old.
Dear 85-year-old, indulge your sweet tooth. You'll need that here soon anyway. My late wife made the best apple pie that you could ever find. When she cut the pieces, she would cut small ones, and when she came to me, she would cut a big one.
Dear 88-year-old, cultivate younger friends. Otherwise, yours will all die off. Sincerely, 91 years old.
Dear 91-year-old, don't listen to other people's advice. Nobody knows what the hell they're doing. Signed, a 93-year-old. Just do your own thing. That's the way I say it.
The popular kids they're so shallow. They like hashtags and pop culture, and it's like, I don't care. That's never going to be relevant in the future.
If your babysitter hates feet, do a handstand and then put your feet right in their face.
Have you ever done that before?
No, but I'm willing to.
Dear 70-year-old, stay weird. Signed, a 72-year-old.
I love that. I love that piece.
I think that went good.
I love how important music and art are to life, really. Giving the texture and depth and spaciousness to the... It's really intense to be alive right now. And maybe it always has been. And I say thanks to the Great Spirit that there is music and art to help us, really, to expand, to make our lives wider and deeper. I've gotten to make friends with Marne Lucas, who's an amazing artist and also an end-of-life doula, somebody who spends time with dying people. And she has started a project called the Bardo Project that really brings her work with dying people and her art together in some amazing and teaching ways. So I'd like to share an interview I did with her. She had previously been on our radio show, I think about a year and a half, 2 years ago. So I'd like to play this interview.
Hi there. My name is Marne Lucas, and I am 51 years old. I'm an end-of-life doula and an artist, and I now live in New York City. I hail from Portland, Oregon.
So I'm really, I really enjoyed meeting you and on Maui, having you on my radio show. That was really fun. And now you're back in the center of the galaxy, New York City. And of course, the center of the galaxy is often the last place that finds out that it's all crumbling. But I'll bet by now even people in New York City recognize the situation we're in. But you're doing such good work out there, and I would say first and foremost, you're an amazing artist. So how when, in terms of connecting art to death, when did you first, as a young person, even figure out there was such a thing as death?
Wow, I was pretty ignorant of death for many, many years. I would say until my 20s. Like, it was something I've definitely avoided. I started making art when I was about 25. I'm a self-taught artist, and I spent many years like being the muse and collaborating with a lot of artists, and I was very focused on beauty, intimacy, sexuality, and the body. So I've always been interested in this container that we have. I didn't really deal with death, and then my father died when I was 28 years old, and he was 51, which is quite young. And I'm now 51 this year, and so this is a really important year for me because it's just such a reminder, that I'm the age in which he passed. I have a very different life than he did. I'm an artist, and I have a lot of freedom, and I don't have the issues that he had. He died from severe pancreatitis due to alcoholism. So, that's not something I'm dealing with, but it really connects me. Like, your parents are how we arrive on the planet, so it was pretty intense to lose him when I was 28 years old. And what I didn't know when he died was that the whole estate and all of the sort of responsibilities that come, like how to get him cremated and how to have a memorial service and what to do with his house and his belongings, all got dumped in my lap because I was legally next of kin. He and my mother had divorced. I'm the oldest of 3 daughters, and I was busy living in Europe and traveling and, you know, had no idea that I was about to be thrust into this driver's seat. And I experienced very protracted grief. Dealing with the machinations of an estate was very messy, and it didn't help me with grieving. But that was the beginning, is losing my father at such a young age. And then from that point on, I lost a lot of artist friends, you know, suicide, car accidents, overdose.
What years were those? Whereabouts is that?
I grew up in Portland, Oregon, which is, you know, and I was around a lot of artists and musicians and activists and actors. And so that is a very dynamic community that tends to live pretty hard. And this was in the mid-90s. So it's a very fertile activist period in my life. I don't make a distinction between being an artist and being an activist.
Or being a human.
That was to me, it's humanist, right? You take care of your people. But that was really the first thing that shifted me towards death. And once my father died, it was like a rolling stone that just triggered many, many deaths in my life. And rather than run away from it, I started to see that, like, this is so much bigger, you know, than I think it is. I used to have a very scientific approach to death and dying. And it's an incredible spiritual experience, just like birth. I now see death as the same thing as birth. And I've been on both. I've been on a few births where I got to participate as a doula. So to me, they're almost the same. You know, you're coming out of the tunnel, you're maybe leaving in another tunnel. I don't know. But for me, they're so similar, which makes it a lot less scary.
Yeah, that's fascinating. My dad died when he was 49, and I was anticipating with some anxiety, would I make it past 49? And I've met so many people who have had that very same experience. A parent dies, and you think, will I get past the age that my parent died? Did you experience that at all?
I knew that it would be an intense year for me. I guess I'm kind of a clinical optimist, so I was pretty sure I would make it past my father's age. And given that I don't have the same, you know, disease processes that he had, but I knew that if I didn't get on board with grief and death, that age was going to knock me on my butt. And it's been a really strange year, right? I mean, here it is, 2020, the pandemic, the civil unrest with Black Lives Matter. I mean, all these things, you know, our current political situation, which is a disaster. So all this stuff is happening. And it's the year that my father died. I feel like there's a lot of valuable lessons in there.
I'll bet. That's powerful.
Very fertile ground for, you know, what my next projects could be.
I like that phrase, clinical optimist. I guess I'm a clinical optimist, although I'd say it's getting harder and harder to be an optimist.
It is. We're all being very, very challenged. I think if you care and you have any kind of awareness about the planet, it's going to be very hard to remain optimistic right now.
And if you're one of those people, I would say you're grieving. Many of us are grieving.
We are. I think this is collective grief with COVID-19, with the civil unrest. We're grieving like the structures we thought we had
or
didn't have. The state of the earth. I believe climate change is part of everything that's happening. You know, I think it's all connected. So I'm not surprised that the House of Cards is coming down right now. It's all deeply, deeply interconnected.
In my view, it needed to come down, as painful and challenging and the amount of suffering it's causing and will cause. It needed to come down, or we were going to kill the world sooner than later.
I agree with you, Bodhi. Absolutely. It's difficult that so many people are losing their lives due to COVID-19, but I do think there was no way we could continue like this extreme capitalist sort of output and not take care of the planet, our citizens, everything. I mean, I do think it had to fall apart.
Actually, compared to the hurricane that almost or might have flattened a lot of Maui, COVID-19 is a fairly benign disaster in terms of getting us all to stop. And hopefully everybody stopped and realized the condition of what's really going on. And hopefully many of those people have now shifted their lifestyle, their life, and their direction.
Yeah, I like what you said about it being a somewhat benign disaster. I think you're right. And, you know, I hear this phrase coming up a lot on social media about the pandemic being the great pause. You know, like other generations, like in the 30s, we had the, you know, the Great Depression. We have the great pause. And it, while it's nerve-wracking to not be able to go outside and do all the women wearing the masks and all of that, and, you know, having everything shut down, if you think about the great pause, that is an opportunity for introspection. That is a very rich time to examine what is important in your life. Where should you focus your efforts? I know a lot of people want to have a career change and they're like, well, they always thought they couldn't afford to stop the treadmill, you know, of like, we all have to do labor to pay rent, to then have a lifestyle. And now people are like, wait a minute, I want to have a healthier lifestyle. I will figure out what kind of labor I have to do to then pay the rent. And I really am seeing that like, this is time for us to choose a life we want to live.
Wow.
With integrity and with love.
That's beautiful, Marne. I love how you articulated that so well. We could imagine that this great pause could be a turning point in the world, and maybe look back upon, if there are people to look back upon it as a defining moment in life on Earth, whether we chose collectively a different path and a different story, or whether we couldn't help but get back to the same story that's killing the world.
Right.
Big.
Right. And I think like communities like where you are, you know, on Maui, like there's a real sense of stewardship of the land, and people there generally really believe in protecting each other and taking care of the ohana, the family. Living here in New York City is interesting because, you know, we've had other disasters here like 9/11 and a couple of blackouts, but nothing like this. And I am seeing people shifting towards a more humanist.
Nope, you froze a little bit now.
Public crisis. I think we have to stop thinking about our borders so much. You know, like these borders aren't important. The virus is everywhere, and we're all humans, and we're all affected. So I'm seeing a real shift here in my community in New York City. Like, it's shifting more in the direction of the way most of the folks I know on Maui think.
Wow, that would be big if New York City was the East Coast version of Maui. I look forward to that. I look forward to that.
You know, do you remember in, what was it, was it 2012 was supposed to be like the Mayan calendar, end of the world kind of shift?
The end of the calendar.
Remember that? I feel like what people were talking about then, I think it's happening in now. I think it's 2020.
And
how, if you look at the timeline of humanity, it's a tiny difference in years.
And how perfect that it's 2020. I mean, we have 2020 vision, maybe finally at last. Finally at last, right?
Exactly.
Maybe
exactly.
Maybe it did happen in 2012, but we expected it to happen overnight. And maybe there are different times, and things happen in different types of time. And surely, I would say we're in it. We're in it. You know.
We are deeply in it. Yeah.
And that's a great thing.
It has been hard.
But let's go to, I want to move
It has been
into,
hard.
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Oh, I was just thinking, like, with the pandemic, it's been hard for me. I'm an artist, and so immediately I thought, oh, I should be so productive. I should be treating this time like a residency, an artist residency, and be making art all the time. And it's been nearly impossible to feel creative. I've been just doing like administrative things and trying to figure out how I'm going to support myself and working on my old rental house in Portland, and nothing super creative. And then my art projects are very collaborative. Like my main project is Bardo Project, where I collaborate with artists with terminal illnesses, and I help them kind of figure out what kind of legacy they want to leave behind, and we do a legacy project together.
Let's go
And
into that. Let's go into
Okay.
that now that you brought that up, because one of the main ways you've brought your life experience into your art is this Bardo project. So tell us about how that came about and what exactly it is.
Sure. It started with a close friend who was a photographer and artist. He was a friend from Portland, Oregon. His name was Chris Brunkart. And he lived in New York City and in Brooklyn with his husband, Zeke, and was diagnosed with stage 4 colon cancer. And he offered to be a part of my project. He knew that I wanted to do this collaborative work with dying artists, but nobody really wanted me to collaborate with them. I mean, you can't go to a hospice place and say, hey, I want to collaborate with your folks. So he took it upon himself to be my first collaborator, and we worked together for 16 months. And we're able to produce a coffee table book and an exhibition. We went on a bucket list trip to Iceland, where I was sort of like a life doula and photo assistant, and driving he and his husband around in a camper van so he could make his last body of landscape photographs. So from him, it progressed to a couple more artists. And then I had an art exhibition in New York City about this work, and I decided to take this project nationwide. I have 2 artists, one in Dallas and one in Houston, that I'm collaborating with. And of course, now I can't go there because their numbers are rising with COVID-19. But even in spite of the virus, like, I think this is really important work. And I think this is my legacy, is helping artists figure out, like, what do they really want to leave behind? But it's challenging to do this work amongst COVID-19, But
Go ahead.
I want to become a nonprofit and take it into a much larger scale, and maybe work with each artist. Maybe not from, in the past, have worked from the time of their diagnosis until their passing, which is pretty intense. It kind of takes over my entire life. So I'm restructuring the project so I can, go visit the artist, make a portrait of them, do an interview with them, and then kind of look at their life's work, and then try to figure out what can we do together given their limited timeline and their limited energy level. Do something that's realistic.
So you've had exhibitions of this work now?
My first exhibition was in Harlem, and it was interesting. My artist friends were pretty bad about attending the exhibition. I think it made them uncomfortable. I think they think death is that thing that happens to old people who die in their sleep. I found a lot of people were really uncomfortable with it. And then the people who did attend the show were incredibly moved and were able to articulate their own feelings about death and dying. There is an activist component to the work, which is I really ask people to think about their own end of life care planning and their own options. Like, do you want to make your own decisions for yourself, or do you want to leave that up to a medical person you don't know? If you get into a healthcare situation where it's not going to work out. So that's always my secret agenda, is community building and activism about better end of life care planning.
I'll bet it's not that secret.
I don't want to hit people over the head, but like when I talk about this work, I'm like smiling, and I'm always get very enthusiastic, and people say, oh, it must be so depressing to be an end of life doula and collaborate with dying artists. And I don't see it that way. I really see it's such a huge honor to work with people at the end of their lives and kind of send them off with a bang, you know, like, and have them participate. It's their death. Why can't they have agency and they get to decide how it goes?
You know, that's the irony, that until you step, excuse me, until you step into this field, you have no idea that it's gonna make us. We all feel more alive, not depressed, not morbid, not bummed out, and we're not causing our death to get even closer to us than it already is. It's
Excellent point.
it's what actually helps us to become more awake and more alive and more fresh in the next moment. And but until you step into that, oh, maybe now you get invited to less parties.
Oh, that's what's happening. My world's getting smaller and smaller.
And you wonder
Yeah.
why aren't your friends calling you anymore?
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, how did you get into the work you're doing?
You know, Marn, I'm not really sure. I mean, when my dad died when I was 17, and that changed my life radically, fairly quickly. And my mom thought I needed to go see a psychiatrist, that I'd gone crazy, and actually I'd gone sane, is what happened. And I'll tell you that one of the powerful images, and as an artist, you'll get it right away. My dad was buried in this big Jewish cemetery in New York, where, as far as you could see, there were gravestones and graveyard, but off in the distance there was a giant auto wrecking yard, and all across the visual landscape were these piles of flattened, rusted cars. And when they were, my brother and sister were right there with me, but they don't remember ever seeing this. And when my dad's casket was being lowered into the hole, and I looked across, there was a giant crane lowering a flattened, rusty car onto the pile of rusted cars. Now, I was 17, Marn, and I didn't have the understanding or even the language to know what I was seeing. But there you have it. And I think it speaks for itself, you know. And then, so in a sense, that you could say that was the beginning for me. But as a minister and a spiritual counselor in the 1990s, people started coming to me around death and dying and grief, and I didn't feel qualified, and then decided to get on the path of becoming a hospice volunteer, and on and on and on and on, and then seeing what was out there, having been a business person, looking what was out there, and looking at the medicalization of death. And the hospice movement, as beautiful as it is a little more advanced, but now is the psychologizing of death. And the spiritual piece of death was really only being touched by the Buddhists mostly.
I agree.
And then I thought, well, there's a whole area that maybe the spiritual, psychological, emotional aspects of living with the fact that you're truly going to die is maybe the most, not maybe, that's the most powerful piece of the whole story, in my view. And I thought, well, okay, maybe I can do something in that world. So, and then somehow ended
it's
up,
all so connected, your entire path.
and then somehow I end up being a funeral director and have a funeral home, which was way out of, I never dreamed of being a funeral director. Never, never. Not as a kid, wishing I'd be a funeral director, nothing. And it's not all I do. I'm teaching a lot around exactly what you are pointing to, this community building and helping people basically come out of the cultural sleepwalk slumber that basically is how we're all eating the world, kind of thing. And it's all kind of met up that the recognition of we're going to die and we don't know when, not just as a thought and a concept, has the power to change our lives fairly quickly. As you know, I know you do, and I certainly know how it's changing and changed my life. So that's the nutshell story of the question.
Beautiful. I love that first image of the flattened, rusted cars. It's like beautiful decay, which is, you know, a term that's often applied towards architecture or like cemeteries and tombstones. And really, those flattened cars, that is the sort of like end product or the death of the industrial age, you know. And America is all about car culture. Like a lot of our landscape is altered because of car culture. And to see that in the background while your father's casket's being lowered to the ground, like that is, yeah, I'm not surprised that like set the tone for your path. And I really like that at the end, you know, later in life, you're like bringing spirituality and community back into death and the death industry.
And yeah, thank you. And then, like you said early on, when you talked about the container, the body as container, right? So, you know, that there was that wrecked car, which really could have been, it could have had a million stories attached to it in terms of the people that had that car and their experiences in that car and where that car took them. But ultimately, all it was a flattened, rusty piece of metal, right? Even though
Right. A relic.
Relic, right? And even though I used to say we're not this body, this is just a container, I don't actually say that anymore, because in truth, I know that we're everything. And if it's true that we're everything, I'm not going to disown this body as being some aspect of the holiness that participates as me. Well, I never said it quite like that. Participates as me.
I love that.
That's pretty
Participate
good.
as me. Yeah, I used to think this container was just a, you know, a biological form made out of carbon and other things, and that when we died, we go into the ground, we decompose, and then therefore energy is not created nor destroyed. We're part of the cycle. But it was only when my father died that I started to understand that, okay, I can't hug him physically. He's not in his container, but I don't love him any less. And I finally realized, you know, after quite a bit of grief, that he isn't truly gone, right? He is
in a bigger
all
container.
things.
He's in a bigger.
It's a bigger container. It's the entire universe. It's in beyond that. It's in every direction, right? He goes back to the ancestors and goes forward into the future in all directions.
And maybe too, he's sitting around the fire with a bunch of his old friends and family, and they're telling stories and telling jokes and praying for you and your family and your people, and keeping an eye on you to case you need some extra prayers.
I think he is doing that, and he's also still continuing to play pranks.
All right.
Yep.
All
Yeah,
right.
it's every time I experience a death, like it drives it home that the person's not gone. And I just recently was a doula for a family in New York earlier this month, and they were really uncomfortable with the idea of being in the same room with their loved one as they passed. And so they were pretty explicit about that was not what they wanted. They did not want to be there. I could be there and I could, you know, advocate for that person, but that wasn't going to happen. And I listened, because that's our job, to listen. And we are not supposed to have an attachment to an outcome, right? You're there to honor that family and that client, the person who's dying. But me being enthusiastic about really wanting them to have a beautiful experience and then not regret later not being there, it ended up that in very short amount of time, I was able to get everybody in the room, and this man passed, and they were all there, and they stayed with his body. You know, he was in the home for 2.5 hours until the undertakers came to get his body. And you know, I still continue to have conversations. He's still my client, even though he has, you know, is deceased. I opened the window. I did a little exercise of sort of like putting him in a bubble. And I told him he can go out that window and go anywhere he'd like to go. He can visit any place he wants to go, and that he was never going to be gone, and that he will always love his family and they will always love him. Nothing is going to change because he's not in that vessel. And I left there and came home, and I was elated. It was as if I had attended a birth, where you have this shiny baby, you know, to see at the end of the day, at the end of the project of giving birth. This felt just like that. And it felt so good to have this family be there. And they were like, oh, it wasn't so hard to be in the room. It's not so scary. you know, and I don't want them to miss the opportunity to be present for this absolutely beautiful moment, even though it is, yes, very emotional and intense to lose a loved one. You know, it doesn't take that sting away, but it just reaffirmed everything I'm doing.
That's beautiful, Marne. And you articulated that so beautifully. Thank you. And then you used the word undertaker, and I play a lot with that word because on some level, I'm an undertaker. So then,
what is the correct term that you prefer within the industry? Because I mean, that's like,
well, I'm not
I'm
within
sure
the
there's more
industry.
when
I'm a
you're
kind
not
of
within.
a fringe industry. I'm the antidote to industry. Uh,
You are.
no, so then I call some of what I do spiritual undertaking. So then it's a spiritual undertaking.
Absolutely, you are absolutely that.
So that yeah, so that's it. So
I think that's your next hat.
well, it is my
I remember your
current hat, and in the
yeah.
many hats I wear, I'm engaged in spiritual undertaking, as many of us are in whatever field we're in. But it's certainly certainly I get to play with that word undertaker. Um, but I don't always dress in black. And in fact,
I'm in black, but I have to share what I'm wearing. I have a cremate the patriarchy. It might be backwards for you. Cremate the patriarchy.
No, I can read
T-shirt.
that. I can read that. Cremate the patriarchy. I like that.
So what's funny is when I wear this, you know, I am of course being like all of my books and T-shirts and stuff are like, you know, a lot of death-related stuff, and I already wear a lot of black T-shirts. And when I wear it, some people look really shocked. It came from the mod mortician I believe she's in Austin, Texas. And so I ordered it, and I also got like the sticker, shiny sticker. And sometimes when I wear it, people look really shocked. Like, I don't mean immolate the patriarchy, like those are living people. That's not what I mean. But it is a good play on words, like, let's get rid of the patriarchy. Let's start over. Let's have a better structure that's more inclusive. But also, you know, it comes from an undertaker, of a, you know, a mortician. So the idea is literal, like you're cremating people who may, like that older generation who may be part of that structure. So there's like all these plays on words, but I really enjoy text-based art, because sometimes people really are staring at you like, what does she mean by that?
Okay, Marne, I'm going to send you one of my T-shirts, which I happen to have on right now, which says, "If found dead, call the death store." And with my phone number. I have a funny story about this shirt,
Would you like
too.
me to pick it up in person? I could pick it up in person the next time I'm on island.
That'd be the best.
I've had to postpone my trip 5 months in a row.
But I'll mail you the
because of
shirt.
the quarantine.
I'll mail
Really?
you the shirt. It'll play big in New York City.
Oh, I'm gonna wear it proudly. Thank you.
You know, I was at the beach, and I have a funny story about this shirt. And a homeless person came up to me and said, "That's a cool shirt. Can I have a shirt? Can I have one of those shirts?" And I said, "Sure, I'll get you a shirt." And then I'm driving away, and I'm thinking, "Oh my God, all these homeless people are going to want a shirt that says, 'If found dead, call the death store.'" And then I thought, wow, I'd like to be set up and in a position where I could go hand out an "If Found Dead" T-shirt to every single homeless person on Maui, so that in fact the police would call me, and that I would be set up with our cemetery that we're working on to develop now, to where I could in fact, they could bring them to me and I'd bury all these people for free. So that's actually a dream I have. But in driving away in that moment, I'm like, oh my God, they're all going to want this T-shirt. Yeah. So.
And then you still succeed in like some humor and some promotion, and then also this beautiful community service. You know, I mean, here we have that Potter's Field, that little island.
Yeah.
In the East River.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a version of Potter's Field. How are things going with your whole master plan with Apuka?
Well, the Puka land project is really kind of in limbo, not only due to the pandemic time, but due that we're about $1 million short to get the land itself. I do feel strongly that once we had the land, the rest of the money would find its way here. But we're still needing to get over this speed bump of raising or having that money show up, and we'll see how that plays out. The best things in my life have happened, and but it's been a great practice in terms of giving it to God and letting go and trusting in the perfection of it all, and doing whatever I'm called to do to make that happen. If there's a part to play for me to make it happen. And I've done plenty of that. And then COVID basically says, go home and get in your garden and relax and be with your grandkids and your beautiful wife and kids and dig in the garden. And I've been doing a lot more of that. But still, I'm teaching a lot more on Zoom. And in fact, I wrote a beautiful booklet called Preparations for Death in Hawaii. And I'm teaching that on the university level. And I'm going to make one for the rest of the country, and then I think set up a series of classes, because I think the mask and the social distancing thing are going to be here for a while. And if I want,
I do too. And what's interesting is with Zoom and teaching, at first I was really resistant because I spent the first 3 months, like, having a lot of Zoom meetings, and I was like, oh, I don't need to be sitting at my computer. But the other thing is, like, we're having this conversation and we're not having to wear a mask.
Why don't you tell us your website info? People that were kind of sparked by the work you're doing can find it somewhere.
Let's see. Well, I am on social media under my name, Marne Lucas, which is MarneLucas. So I'm at Marne Lucas on Facebook and Instagram. I just started an Instagram account, End of Life Doula New York, one word. And I am working on my website for Bardo Project, because that is the thing I'm going to be moving forward with in a very significant way. So that needs to get online pronto.
Beautiful. And do you know my friend Amy Cunningham?
I know that name, Amy Cunningham.
She's a funeral director in Brooklyn.
Oh, yes. In fact, that woman is incredible. I host End of Life Doula meetups in New York. I started in January and February and March, and then the pandemic hit. So I was hosting them near 14th Street. My partner has a palliative care office, so they let us use the space. And so I was having these End of Life Doula meetups, and of course, I invited maybe 10 or 12 people, but they all bring someone. And so somebody brought her to the meeting, and I just kind of turned the floor over to her and was like, I would love to hear more about what you do. And this was literally the first week of March when I got to meet her, and the pandemic was just starting to get steam. So I can only imagine what she has gone through and her colleagues in the last, several months. But she's absolutely an amazing human.
And she works in this amazing cemetery in Brooklyn, right? She took
yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's a massive cemetery. And they're having an artist residency program, that cemetery.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, well, I'm looking forward to seeing you on island as soon as the quarantine lifts. I will be there. Now it'll looking like September 1st.
That sounds great, Martin. I look forward to it. Yeah. And I'm going to get you to send me your mailing address. I want to send you, I'll send you a shirt right away.
I will wear it proudly. And I would love to do something at the death store when I'm on island. I don't know if we could do, of course, with distancing, I want to do some kind of arts related little project with people. We could do something that's drop in art project around death and dying and transformation.
That would be great. I'm actually looking at setting up a series of classes here called The Arts of Dying. And
okay, here we go.
Right? All right. So yes, you'll be the featured artist at least one of these. That would be fabulous, Marne. Let's do that.
Okay, I would love to. And thank you for the opportunity. I'm always happy to talk with you. I love the radio format, but this is also very exciting.
Cool. And great to look at you, inside and outside, a beautiful being. And I have so much respect and appreciation for who you are and how you show up. So Thanks for being with me today.
Thank you. Aloha nui loa.
Aloha nui loa. Bye.
Bye.
This is a poem by Jeff Foster. You will lose everything. Your money, your power, your fame, your success, perhaps even your memory. Your looks will go. Loved ones will die. Your own body will eventually fall apart. Everything that seems permanent is absolutely impermanent and will be smashed. Experience will gradually, or not so gradually, strip away everything that it can strip away. Waking up means facing this reality with open eyes and no longer turning away. Right now, we stand on sacred and holy ground. For that which will be lost has not yet been lost, and realizing this is the key to unspeakable joy. Whoever or whatever is in your life right now has not yet been taken away from you. This may sound obvious, but really knowing it is the key to everything, the why and how and wherefore of existence. Impermanence has already rendered everything and everyone around you so deeply holy and significant and worthy of your heartbreaking gratitude. Love has already transfigured your life into an altar. Wow, did you get that? Impermanence itself is holy, is holiness itself. That which we resist the most, change, for most of us, change may be the thing we resist the most. Impermanence, that all things will change. And the truth that everyone we love and care about will die, and everything we love and care about will die. That's why it seems like to me, love and grief are wrapped around each other, interwoven, inseparable. The part of us that knows we will be saying goodbye to everyone we love and care about, to everything we love and care about. And when we have awareness of the love and the grief, how beautiful, how precious, how fragile, how important it all is, and how each moment is so preciously important. And now we'll listen to the sounds of whales this winter off the coast of Maui, and the beautiful sound of the mbira instrument. Sometimes we foolishly imagine that the whales are here for our pleasure and enjoyment. How silly of us, thinking that everything is here for us, humans, that somehow we're at the top of the pyramid and most important part of creation. Sounds to me that the whales sing and dance and have so much fun together here in the Hawaiian waters, and probably laugh at how silly us humans are. Well, as all things must end, so too this show. I'm Bodie B. You've been listening to Death Tracks on KAKU 88.5 FM and on the web at kakufm.org. Many of you know I'm the executive director of Doorway into Light, a nonprofit educational and charitable organization here in Hawaii You can find out more about our services at www.doorwayintolight.org. Thank you all so much for joining in. Be well and be safe. Aloha.
Aloha.